At 100,000 square feet, Whitehall was Florida's first palatial Gilded Age mansion, stuffed to the brim with marble and exotic wood and overflowing with spectacular works of art. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1830, Henry Morrison Flagler was born in the small town of Hopewell, New York, the son of a poor preacher. By his early 20s, he had worked his way into the grain business in Bellevue, Ohio, prospering enough to marry Mary Harkness in 1853 and to start looking for something bigger. He founded in 1862, or at least he thought he did, when he sank his life savings into a salt mining venture in Saginaw, Michigan, reasoning that wartime demand would keep prices high. It did, right up until the war ended, and when the salt market collapsed, it took roughly $100,000 of Flagler's money with it, much of that having been borrowed. At 35, the future builder of palaces was broke, in debt, and starting completely over. He clawed his way back through the grain trade in Cleveland, and there he deepened an old acquaintance with a young commission merchant named John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller had moved into the new and chaotic business of refining oil into kerosene, and he needed capital to grow. Flagler found it, largely through his wife's cousin, Stephen Harkness, who agreed to invest a fortune on one condition, that Flagler be made a partner. In 1867, the firm of Rockefeller, Andrews, and Flagler opened its doors, and in 1870 it was reorganized as the Standard Oil Company, with Flagler serving as secretary and treasurer. It was Flagler who negotiated the secret railroad rebates that gave standard freight rates no rival could match, and Flagler who wrote many of the airtight contracts that held the growing empire together. Within about a decade, Standard Oil controlled roughly 90% of American oil refining, and the poor preacher's son had become one of the richest men in the country. What money could not do was save his wife. Mary's health had been failing for years, and on doctor's orders, the Flaglers began spending winters in Florida, then a remote, swampy frontier with little that a wealthy northerner would recognize as comfort. Mary died in 1881, and something in Flagler changed. In his mid-50s, an age when most Gilded Age titans were commissioning yachts and easing into retirement, he stepped back from Standard Oil's daily affairs and started a second career, building modern Florida almost from scratch. In St. Augustine, he raised the Hotel Ponce de Leon, a Spanish Renaissance dream palace designed by two ambitious young architects named John Carrere and Thomas Hastings. To fill his hotels, he needed a railroad, so he bought one, then another, knitting the lines into the Florida East Coast Railway and driving it steadily down the coast. At Palm Beach, he built the enormous Royal Poinciana, said for a time to be the largest wooden building in the world, and then the breakers beside the ocean. The railroad reached the bay in 1896, and the grateful new town offered to name itself Flagler. He declined the honor, and they called it Miami instead. His personal life took stranger turns. A second marriage to Ida Alice Shords collapsed after she was declared insane and confined to an institution. And in 1901, the Florida legislature made incurable insanity grounds for divorce, a law widely understood to have been passed solely for Flagler's benefit. Just weeks after the divorce became final, the 71-year-old Flagler married 34-year-old Mary Lily Kenan of North Carolina. As a wedding present, he promised to build her a palace, and that word was not an exaggeration. The palace was Whitehall, and it rose on Palm Beach with Lake Worth lapping at its grounds and the Atlantic rolling just beyond the island. To design it, Flagler called back Carrere and Hastings, the pair from the Ponce de Leon who were on their way to their most famous commission of all time, the New York Public Library. For Flagler, they produced a Beaux-Arts palace, blazing white beneath a red tile roof, its face turned east to catch the morning sun. That was no accident, because the architects threaded the entire design with references to Apollo, the god of light and the arts, treating the house itself as a kind of temple. The front was dominated by a marble portico more than 100 feet wide, carried on 6 colossal Doric columns. Counting its porticos, the building measured 256 feet by 176 feet, wrapped around a central open-air courtyard, and behind those white walls lay 75 rooms and roughly 100,000 square feet, making Whitehall one of the largest private homes ever built in America. Guests arrived across a broad lawn shaded by coconut palms and enclosed by one of the most elaborate wrought iron fences in the country. Through a pair of heavy bronze doors, visitors stepped into the grand hall and by most accounts simply stopped. The room stretched 110 feet long and 40 feet wide beneath a 20-foot ceiling, finished in 7 varieties of marble. Overhead, a painted dome depicted the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi. keeping the sun god watching over everything below. At the far end, a grand marble staircase swept up toward the second floor behind a gleaming bronze railing. Keep that staircase in mind, because it plays a huge role later on in this story. From the grand hall, the public rooms of the first floor unfolded in a ring around the central courtyard, linked so that guests could drift from one straight into the next. Each was decorated in a different historical style by the New York firm of Pottier and Stuyvesant, which meant that a walk through Whitehall felt a little like a walk through the centuries. On one side lay the library, done in the manner of the Italian Renaissance, where Flagler read, received visitors, and quietly ran an empire that stretched from Manhattan boardrooms to the end of the Florida Keys. Its ceiling appeared to be heavy carved wood inset with panels of tooled leather, but it was actually molded plaster and fabric, painted into one of the most convincing illusions in the house. And above the fireplace hung a portrait of the man himself. Beyond it, the music room doubled as an art gallery and held a pipe organ of over 1,200 pipes, played on many evenings by the family's own resident organist. In its dome glowed a painted copy of Aurora, lit from behind by concealed electric bulbs, a cutting-edge trick in 1902. Across the house, the drawing room served as Mary Lily's formal salon, decorated in the Louis XVI style in soft gray and silver and trimmed not with gold leaf but with aluminum leaf, another trick of the eyes. When dinner was announced, the party moved to the dining room, a French Renaissance showpiece paneled in rare Jamaican satinwood, so much of it that this was likely the largest and most elaborate satinwood room ever built anywhere in the world. Beneath its 16-foot ceiling and a fireplace carved with mermaids and sea monsters, the Flaglers could seat 24 guests at a banquet table made, like the room around it, by Pottier and Stuyvesant. The crown jewel was the grand ballroom, 91 feet of white and gold in the Louis XV style. Its doorways and windows crowned with painted lunettes, its ceiling hung with glittering crystal chandeliers. In 1903, it hosted a powdered wig costume ball that the press crowned the most brilliant social event in Florida's history. For years afterward, an invitation to Whitehall was the hottest ticket of the season, and the Palm Beach season itself increasingly revolved around whatever Mary Lily was hosting. In nearly every one of these rooms opened onto the courtyard at the heart of the house, an open-air garden of palms and cool shadow built to pull the lake breeze through the mansion. At its center splashed a marble fountain crowned with a copy of a Venus first commissioned by the Medici family for the Boboli Gardens in Florence. Mary Lily got barely a decade to enjoy it all because her husband spent his final years chasing one last impossible project, an oversea railroad leaving 156 miles from key to key across open water to Key West, a scheme skeptics called Flagler's Folly. In January 1912, the first train rolled into Key West with the 82-year-old Flagler aboard, and he told the crowd that his dream was fulfilled and he could now die happy. As it turns out, he very nearly meant it. In March 1913, Flagler fell down that grand marble staircase at Whitehall and never recovered, passing away on May 20th of that year at the age of 83. As his funeral train moved up the coastline he had transformed, every engine on the Florida East Coast Railway stopped for 10 minutes in tribute, and he was laid to rest in St. Augustine beside his first wife and his daughter. So what became of the Marble Palace by the lake? Whitehall sat mostly closed, and Mary Lily returned only once more in 1917 as the new bride of Robert Worth Bingham, passing away later that same year. The house passed to her niece, Louise Lewis, who sold it to a group of investors, and in 1925 they grafted an 11-story tower with more than 250 rooms onto the west side of the mansion, reopening the whole property as Whitehall Hotel. Its great rooms pressed into services as lobbies and lounges. For more than 3 decades, the house survived that way, glamorous but compromised, until the hotel closed, and by 1959, the wrecking ball was on the schedule. And here's the twist of fate, because Whitehall was never lost. Flagler's granddaughter, Jean Flagler Matthews, formed a nonprofit corporation, bought the building in 1959, and opened it to the public the very next year as the Henry Morrison Flagler Museum. The hotel tower came down in 1963. The rooms were painstakingly restored to their 1902 appearance. In 2000, Whitehall was designated a National Historic Landmark, and today it stands on the shore of Lake Worth, exactly where Flagler put it, one of the last great Gilded Age palaces in America you can still walk through. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Which room was your favorite? Let me know down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.